Grew up in a Christian home, so I knew all the Christian cliche sayings, but it wasn't real to me, and I truly didn't know what living out the gospel meant. I left college and moved to a big city. I took a job at a very affluent bank. I felt the pressures to look like everybody else, to be able to go and do like everybody else, to drive the cars that everybody else did, and to live the life of the city that I lived in. I felt the pressure to look a certain way, and so I would spend whatever money it cost to look that way, meaning from clothes to hair to shoes to accessories, even down to the weight. I would try to stop shopping. I would try to stop spending money on expensive dinners and appearing to be able to afford this lifestyle that I couldn't. And honestly, I didn't want to give it up. I mean, it was great to be known. It was great to have a nice car. It was great to look the part. And I struggled with giving that up. Sin always has a consequence. For me, that was an incredible amount of debt that I had acquired while I was trying to live the lifestyle that I couldn't afford. During this time, I have never felt so empty inside. It was the most terrible feeling I've ever had. Just felt like I was a failure, felt so gross, felt like God must be so disappointed in me. That really changed my perspective enough to where I was ready to make a change. Through a lot of chain of events, I ended up going to Uganda for 3 months. I was a manager of an orphanage home with 57 children. I came into it knowing that there would be some challenging moments. In no way am I equipped to be a manager of a baby's home. I'm not even a mom. I knew that it was gonna be an uncharted territory for me, but I was open and willing to do whatever the Lord had asked me to do. God just equipped me in a way that I've never been equipped. I quickly realized that I don't need a lot of the things that I think that I need. I felt like I needed to fill my life with the comforts of what America says that we need. And there I realized that I need nothing but the Lord, and I need nothing but His provision. So I returned home from Uganda after 3 months. I am now wrestling with a call to go back for a year. I can't pick up and leave right now because I have the chains of debt. Satan still tries to use it to make me feel guilty from where I came, and then I spent so much time and money to make myself feel better. It was all selfish working through that, but having to work harder than I would have if I would have started living the gospel sooner.
Harsh transition there. I wasn't ready. So sorry. I want to ask you a really simple question. Are you tired yet of constantly needing more stuff? You and I weren't created to just collect, consume, and manage things. And as a matter of fact, for most of the history of the United States, that's not how our economy worked. Our economy was a needs-based economy up until World War I. And after World War I, we had created all of these factories to make things. And we had all of these employees working. And then the war was over. And there were employees that needed jobs, factories that needed to produce stuff. And so the economic leaders of the country decided we needed to move from a needs-based economy to a desire-based economy. Paul Mazur was one of the partners at Lehman Brothers, and he is quoted as saying, "We must shift America from a needs culture to a desire culture. People must be trained to desire, to want new things, even before the old have been entirely consumed. We must shape a new mentality in America. Man's desires must overshadow his needs." The reason he said this was otherwise all these factories will fail. And so as a result of trying to keep the economy in shape, we created a culture for the last 100 years of constant desire, not need. After a few decades, the factories began to realize they didn't need to make things as high quality. And so functional obsolescence became a thing where we made things not to last forever, but to last until they would be replaced by somebody wanting a different color dishwasher, somebody wanting a different color kitchen cabinet. And today, Our consumable goods don't last nearly as long as they used to because the manufacturers know you won't keep it that long. And so it's wasteful, it's expensive, and as a result, we spend 10 times what our great-great-great-grandparents spent on consumable goods. Yeah, and that's adjusted for inflation, okay? I know they could buy bread for 2 cents. Adjusted for inflation, we spend 10 times as much. Because there are outside forces that depend on you and I desiring more stuff. And what's interesting is if you pay attention to the advertisements that are trying to get you to buy more stuff, what you will find is that most of the advertisements, with the exception of like advertisements for fast cars or alcohol, most of the advertisements are selling you a picture of rest. If you had this bedroom set, you would have real rest. If you drove this comfortable, luxurious vehicle, you could really rest. If your home were just a little bit newer, think of any lifestyle magazine, or for that matter, any ad you see served to you on Instagram or especially Pinterest. What they're selling you is a moment of rest in a beautiful home that is well put together. And every one of our hearts say, if my home looked like that, I could have real peace, real rest. And what's ironic is they're saying, and you can have it if you'll just mortgage the rest of your days to get it. Here's the truth that most of us need to understand. You don't need a new bedroom set to have rest. You don't need a new car to have rest. You don't need to be thinner, better, smarter. Right now, you and I can embrace rest because Jesus says that rest is a gift given to believers, given to us. But too often we have identified rest and really attached rest to things. I'm not going to read you all of the Proverbs, but the Proverbs actually say the opposite. The Proverbs tell us that the more things you have, the more stress you'll have. The more things you have, the more anxiety you'll have. The more things you have actually will shorten your life. And here's what the authors were saying. None of us have enough time to manage, ensure, care for, and even look at all the things we want to have in this life. The greatest lie that we hear is, it's not good enough for me to enjoy the world. I need to own as much of the world as possible. It's funny when I drive by people's homes, and I'll just tell you, I've told you all the jet ski story. I didn't jet ski for 10 years after that jet ski accident almost cost me my life. But my wife and I, we love, from time to time, renting jet skis. And every once in a while, I'll get this little idea, we should buy a jet ski. And I'll drive by people's homes, and you know what I'll see all the time? Jet skis that have not been in the water in a long, long time. And what they have is they have a jet ski payment, and they never, some of y'all right now are like, we have a jet ski in our driveway. I'm so sorry, I'm not picking on you, I promise. But you know, when my wife and I, we go rent the jet skis, it's like, it's $80 an hour, it's $100 an hour. Can you believe this outrageousness? Well, I don't know how much a jet ski payment is, but I bet it's more than $100. And I've had some friends who have jet skis and they have to maintain them. They have to take them into the shop, and sometimes things go wrong with them. I've just found it's a lot cheaper for me to rent jet skis down in the Outer Banks when I'm down there, rent a jet ski up here, and then give it back and say, now you go fill it up, you go take care of it, you go insure it, you go care for it, right? We go on a vacation, and some of us, this is our fatal flaw. We go on vacation and say, I could live here. I should own a house here. There's a spot where me and some buddies, my wife hates skiing, so I always go with guys, and we enjoy it. And every time I'm there, I'm looking at the brochures. You know, it really does make sense if I were to own a condo here. In the long run, I'd really be coming out. Because, heaven forbid I ski anywhere else but this one spot for the rest of my life, and I have a payment attached to it. Why? Because there's this desire in us that, it would make me really happy to have more stuff to worry about, more stuff to clean, more stuff to insure. Some of us think, man, if I could just have more cars until it's Saturday and you got to wash all 3 of them cars. This one's ready for an oil change. Let's get an oil change on that one. And the more stuff you have, the Bible actually says the more it'll stress you out. You gotta hire an army of people to care for these things. Whereas the Bible says we were created to rest and enjoy all this bounty, all these good things that God has given to us. I'm going to jump into the scripture. Before I do, I'm going to talk to you about this one prayer that's kind of gotten out of whack. The Prayer of Jabez in the year 2000. That book that book like just changed everything. People are like, I'm going to pray the Prayer of Jabez. And Jabez's name means pain. He was born into pain. And more likely than not, Jabez wasn't this wealthy guy saying, God, give me more. He was someone who was in pain saying, God, give me enough to survive. We need more land to provide for our children. Boy, but we take those and we flip them in America. We're like, I have all that I need. God, give me all that I want. And that has never been God's intention, because the truth is, desire, though it's natural to us, can never be satisfied in the material world. Most of you know how this goes. You open a gift you thought you'd love, and you love it for a year or two, and then you forget where it is. Your kids, my kids, they're all guilty of it. But there's this thing that the older we get, we take that and we place it on something else. Okay, stuff won't do it, but maybe a house will. Maybe a car will. Maybe a title on my name. If I could just have more stuff. In this series, Finding Rest, we're going to deal with 5 lies. And the first lie I'm going to deal with this morning is that I can really rest. I could really rest if I had more. If I had more money in the bank, if I had more property in my name, if I just had more material wealth. Now, I would remind you that simply by being born in the United States of America, most of us have won the genetic lottery. We make upwards of 5, 6, sometimes 10 times what other people make in the world just by being born here. Now, I know that doesn't do much because you're not living next to somebody who lives 10 times below your means. You're living next to people who are living 2 and 3 times above your means. And so comparison really robs us of our contentment. And we have no idea the debt that people are carrying, the jet ski payments. You know what I'm talking about. But we compare ourselves to the point that we believe if I had more than everyone else, if I experienced everything, I'd be truly happy. Philosophers have actually guessed and assumed, they say the only way for a human to be satisfied in every desire would be for them to experience everything the world has to offer. Eat at every restaurant, visit every place, and be experienced by everyone on the planet. Have a conversation with everyone. It's impossible. You couldn't eat at every restaurant in Hampton Roads over the next 10 years. There's just too many. And so our soul is constantly wanting more and desiring. And C.S. Lewis put it this way: if we discover a desire within us that nothing in this world can satisfy, we should begin to wonder if perhaps we were created for another world. I've told you before, the desire in your heart that is never satisfied is really your inner soul's cry for Garden of Eden rest. Relationship with God, work alongside God, and rest with the Lord. Augustine put it this way: sin comes when we take a perfectly natural desire or longing or ambition and try desperately to fulfill it without God. Not only is it sin, it is a perverse distortion of the image of the Creator in us. All these good things, all our security, are rightly found only and completely in Him. Here's the point that C.S. Lewis and Augustine are making. You and I cannot find satisfaction here, complete, real satisfaction. Our only source of satisfaction is God. And here's why. Because from the beginning, we were created to inhabit a perfect place with justice and peace and righteousness, and enjoy the presence of God and work alongside God on meaningful work. Work didn't come after the fall. It was present before the fall. There were things for us to do in the garden, but then it became hard, and there were thorns and sweat, and the earth worked against us after the fall. So there's this idea that we have real meaningful work to do alongside the Creator, and then there's this day of rest built in where we walk with the Lord. And most of us think that we can somehow attain that level of peace and rest by just having a newer car. If the house would just be finished and every project done. It's wild. The second law of thermodynamics is true of everything in the world. Everything begins breaking down the second you're done with it. When my wife and I moved into our house, one of the first things we took care of was the bathroom downstairs. And boy, my son has destroyed it. He's only 20 months old. Just last night, I was giving him a bath, and he really knows how to work daddy. He doesn't want to go to bed, so he's like, I'll extend bath time. So he makes it clear, like, I want you in. Because I take baths with my son. So I went, put on some trunks, got in with him. And you know what he started doing? He started picking up his cup of water, looking at me, and pouring it outside of the bathtub, just all over the floor. He does it all the time. The baseboards are rotten. If you come over our house, we say, here's the kitchen, here's the living room. Please don't use the restroom. You don't want to go in there. Just hold it. I promise you'll be better off. But the moment we get done with something, it begins breaking down. The moment we drive the car home, the moment we get the keys to the new house, the moment we have something, we have to begin considering long-term care for that thing. Who's going to cut the grass? Who's going to replace the roof? Who's going to wash that thing? In Matthew chapter 11, verse we read last week, we'll read it every week, Jesus says this and offers this to those who would come follow him. He says, come to me, all who labor, all of you who are working and somehow think, and the real tone here is an undertone of religiosity. If you think you can work your way to God, come with me. And you're heavy laden with all these extra rules that the Pharisees have added on, and I will give you rest. I believe with all my heart, the closer I get to God, the more I will embrace real, true Sabbath rest. It is a practice of renewal. Your body needs it. Your heart needs it. Your soul needs it. Your friends need you to have it. How many of us are more loving when we're well rested? How many of us are more generous when we're well rested? How many of us are more gracious when life doesn't go our way when we're well rested? And we wonder, what could be robbing us of our rest? When I began planning this series months ago, I always wanted to get here because I'm convinced what is robbing most of us of rest is materialism. Our constant desire for more is killing us. He says, take my yoke upon you. Learn from me, for I'm gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Look, Jesus is interested in your body. Don't get me wrong. He wants you to be healthy, but more than that, he wants your soul to find rest. Because more than you need God to touch your physical body, if your soul can find rest, how many clinical studies have we seen where most of our physical ailments trace back to stress, anxiety, fear, doubt, and over-anxiousness? We go on vacation, but we're not away from work. We're worked up. He says, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. That's our frame of reference for this entire series. Jesus offers us rest. So I'm going to look at some teachings of Jesus, some teachings of Paul, in how we can find that rest. And this morning I'm going to look at what they had to say about materialism, about the constant desire for more stuff. In Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21, Jesus said this. He says, don't lay up for yourselves treasure on earth, where moth, I'll leave this up here because I want to stay here for a minute, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. Do you know what Jesus is saying? He's saying, too many of you bought something without considering how much wear and tear it's going to do on you to care for it. I remember when I was younger and I wanted a truck. I had no idea how to care for a truck. You got to take care of your truck. You can't just take it in the mud. You know what happens if you take it in the mud? It begins to rust if you don't wash the underside. I remember wanting to take it down to the Outer Banks. Took it down to the Outer Banks. You know what happens if you drive it through the sand? Even more rust. And today there's little holes in the side of my truck because I didn't know that just having something was one thing. Then you got to keep rust off of it. You got to keep moths off of it. You got to take care of it. In 21st century language, this would look like this. Don't lay up for yourselves stuff on earth that you have to insure, clean, license, pay fees for, store. Still to this day, the largest growing sector in real estate in America, you know what it is? Storage. It ain't enough for us to have stuff in our bigger houses than our great-grandparents had. We got to have more storage for it. Some of y'all are like, Pastor, I have a jet ski. I've got a storage unit. What are you doing to me? I'm not picking on you. 30,000-foot view here. He says, all these things you're laying up, they're just work to maintain and care for. He says, but instead, he says, don't do this, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. The greatest investment of your life is investing in the kingdom to come. With your time, your energy, your resources, all of it. And Jesus is drawing a clear picture here. He's talking to people who, like we are drawn to things they see. And he says, you're going to spend your whole life caring for these things if you aren't careful. And I want you to have real life, abundant life, life that is deeper than that. He says in verse 21, for where your heart is, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. The thing about stuff that Jesus is saying is that stuff, if we aren't careful, will actually rob us of life in this earth. What's wild is that God created everything. To this day, we cannot create matter. We can manipulate matter. We can craft matter to make something, but we can't make something out of nothing. Only God can do that. So God made everything we see. And what do? We want it. We somehow think, it's not enough for me to have the ocean that I can go visit. I have to have oceanfront property or it's mine. This sand is mine. You know what's wild? The wind will blow that sand up on your house. The waves will actually wash out your foundation. But it was mine. And so God is saying, I've made all of this, and yet what you've done is you've worshiped the thing instead of the Creator, and it's begun to rob you of real life, true life. Jesus is drawing us to consider the cost, ultimately, of stuff. I find rest from the desire for more when I actually consider how much it will cost. What Jesus is saying, it's going to cause you worry, it's going to cause you anxiety, and you're going to have to care for it. Now, Jesus isn't saying, hey, you shouldn't have anything. Like, there's just going to be stuff. Some of his disciples and followers of Christ, like business owners, they own things, but things didn't own them. What you find is actually they often began, as soon as they began following Jesus, they sold off everything they could so that they could be freed from the burden, as that young lady said in that video, that kept them somewhere. They were free to move about the country. They were free to go around the world. They were free to go do whatever God called them to do. Why? Because they'd sold everything that tethered them down to a place, to a job, to a spot when God may be calling them to go, to be, to do. And what I would hate is for another generation of American Christians to mortgage their souls off between the ages of 20 and 45. And then when they get to the point they could retire, could move on, could do anything God puts in their heart, they can't move, they can't leave, they can't go, they can't serve, they can't do anything because they have the chains not only of debt, but of things owning them, stuff owning them. You're going to own stuff. Be careful not to allow it to own you. And what Jesus is saying is it's really hard because the more stuff you have, the more you've got to worry about it. You got to put it somewhere. It's got to go somewhere. Then Jesus turns the corner in verse 25, Matthew chapter 6 and verse 25. He says, therefore I tell you, don't be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink or your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Now, most of us don't worry too much about food and clothing because we are reading this 2,000 years after the fact. But most of the people who gathered on hillsides to hear Jesus preach, farmers and peasants, most of them poor, very, very insecure when it came to food, didn't have more than a week's worth of food, many of them less than a few days' worth of food in their pantry. Now, today we figured out how to make food last longer, and there are consequences to that. Health consequences, too much salt in our diet. I understand all of that. But most of us, we don't worry about our food. But boy, we do worry about our clothing sometimes if you consider clothing to be how you're perceived. Am I keeping up? Back then, there were no cars. So when you saw people in public, it all came down to what you were wearing. Okay? Right jacket, right sandals, how many servants are with you. And what's funny is 2,000 years later, technology is completely different, clothing's completely different, but the mindset's still the same. Do I look better than everyone else? I mean, do I look like I'm just doing a little better than everybody else I graduated with? I mean, would everyone else just be a little jealous of my life if I post this picture? And that's the wild part. Not only are there whole wings of advertising agencies determined to sell you rest, which is an oxymoron, But then our well-intentioned friends and ourselves well-intentioned, we go online and we only post the best versions of ourselves. And as a result, we make everyone else feel like they need to be there. They need to do that. They need to go on that trip. They need that too to find real, oh, I would just have so much more rest if I were in Italy. I don't know about that, especially if you don't speak Italian. And you don't like pizza, and you don't like the food. Like, I'm sure we'd all find rest somewhere, but here's the point. You don't have to be somewhere else. You don't have to go somewhere else. You don't have to spend this much money. Rest is something we embrace in the here and now, regardless of where we are, how big or small our home is, how much debt we have crippling us from past decisions we've made. Rest is a choice in the here and now. He says, don't worry about these things. Do you know what Jesus is saying? You don't need to wait till your things are more abundant to find this rest. You can have it now. It's a decision to make. He says, don't be anxious about this. I promise you I'm going to care for you. He says, look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more value than they? He says, you are more meaningful to God than the birds he created, and yet they float. Here's the wild part about birds. They might build a nest, but they're not like squirrels, hiding walnuts and hiding all kinds of food. They're just flying around saying, I bet there's worms tomorrow. I bet there's a dumb bug tomorrow hanging out on that branch where I can get them. And they go through this life free of the cares and worries. And here's the wild part. We're self-aware. We're created in God's image. And yet it is these desires that if we aren't careful will cripple us and almost make less human out of us, make us less human because we're so worried, anxious, frightful that we don't even act in a reasonable way. We act in ridiculous ways to the point you don't have to go far to find an episode of hoarders where someone is allowing their stuff to literally kill them because of the mold that's growing on it, because they can't get around their house, because it's gross what their children are having to deal with in a health way. But they can't get rid of even old stuff because somehow they've attached their meaning, their value to things. He says, which of you by being anxious can add a single hour to his span of life? You worrying, he's making a point here, doesn't help. And as a matter of fact, now we know it hurts. It can shave years off your life. He says, and why are you anxious about clothing, by the way? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. They don't make their own clothes. Yet, he says, I tell you, even Solomon. And Solomon, when he walked around, everybody was impressed. In all his glory, he was not arrayed like one of these. Most of you, the most beautiful thing you've laid your eyes on has never been a piece of clothing. It's never been another human. It has been a field of flowers, a mountainscape, a seascape, a sunset, something that God put together, and it does not work for that beauty. It just enjoys the beauty God has placed on it. But if God clothes the grass of the field, which today isn't alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you? Oh, you have little faith. He says, you have so much anxiety and fear and frustration that all you do is think about these things, and it does nothing for you. You're worried about it, and worrying doesn't actually help. I find rest from desire for more when I stop thinking about more. Now, I know that most of our thoughts are not even determined by ourselves anymore. A lot of our thoughts are determined by this. Sabbath practice goes back thousands of years, even before Jesus. In the Old Testament, God's people are called to Sabbath, and some of the things they would do during Sabbath are really special and really specific. First of all, it was to stop, so they didn't work, but it was also to enjoy, and so they would enjoy. And so on the Sabbath day, what you'll find is they enjoyed naps. And is there any better picture of resting in God than saying, I can take a nap in the middle of the day and trust the world will still be there when I wake up? Because some of us, we just think we need to be more hardworking. We view naps as lazy. They also enjoyed a big, heavy meal. It's where they brought out the fat and the wine. Like, it was a great meal. So what I'm saying is today is the day, y'all. Get them carbs. No keto, no diet today. It's all in. They enjoyed all the good things God gave them. I don't want to be too crass. Married couples enjoyed sexual relations on the Sabbath because it was one of the things that God created for them to enjoy. It was a day of stopping and enjoying all the good things God has given us. Why? So that on that one day, we'd be reminded, oh, I've got a good family. Another practice that they would often partake in was walking. And by the way, walking is good for your soul if you're physically able and capable. Get out there and get you some fresh air, especially right now, and just be reminded, man, God has put me, I'll just use us for an example, right where we live right here. I don't know where you live, but I don't have to walk far. Most of us don't. There's a creek somewhere. There's a canal somewhere. There's a body of water, a lake. We're full of water around here. You can't go to work without crossing 7 bridges and 3 tunnels, okay? And that's why we can't get to work in less than 2 hours. But there's water everywhere. There's beauty. There's wildlife. There's cranes. There's even eagles. There is something to take in and just be reminded, God, you put me here, and I can find rest today. There were no phones back then, but the idea of stopping, I would encourage you, maybe one day a week, don't allow Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest and every other website to tell you what you need to be happy. And that's really all these websites do, if we're really honest. Every ad is designed to sell you something, and if they can attach that to rest or happiness, they will. And so you'll come away from a few hours on social media and think, my truck is old. My bathroom is not as cool as theirs. I'm not wearing the newest and latest, greatest styles. I've told you guys before, I am the happiest, freest, and most rested when I go camping because while I'm camping, there's no internet service, and suddenly my truck is not that old. My house is not that lame. I am just grateful for all that God has put in front of me. And so I want you to make a spiritual habit of not just not thinking about more, but writing down all the things you're thankful for and we're grateful for here. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, Paul piggybacks on the teaching of Jesus, really takes it to the next level. He says in verse 6 of 1 Timothy 6, but godliness with contentment is great gain. This is a great thing for you to take hold of in this life. For we brought nothing into the world, and this is true of all of us, and we cannot take anything out of the world. You can't, no matter how much you get. He says in verse 8, but if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. He says, this is good. Verse 9, but those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. How many of us have fallen victim to a scam because we wanted to get rich quick? Proverbs, Psalm, all the way through the Bible, God warns against get rich quick schemes. God has always said, use your money wisely, put it away. Slow wealth wins the day. Get rich quick scams always hurt you. They plunge them into ruin and destruction. Then verse 10 says, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. Guys, there are many different ways in which it can harm you and hurt you to constantly want more. And here's the wild part. As I'm preaching right now, I'm sharing this truth with the wealthiest generation of the wealthiest nation. And right now, there are brothers and sisters of ours who have convinced themselves. They live in Turkey, they live in India, they live in China, they live in Pakistan. They've convinced themselves if they could have what you have right now, they'd find real rest. And you know already it's a lie. Just because we find ourselves at the top of the financial food chain, we still have no rest.